That night, I heard something that changed my life forever. It wasn't a scream or a confession. It was a whisper that slipped under a door, pierced my chest, and tore my soul right out. If they find out the truth, the wedding is off. It was 11:15. I was walking down the dark second-floor hallway, looking for my glasses, which I'd left in the study. I never imagined that at that hour, I'd find my wife coming out of my daughter's fiancé's room. Her hair was down, her blouse was wrinkled, and her face was flushed like someone who had just committed a sin. When our eyes met, I knew something terrible was about to be revealed. She stopped in front of me, frozen, as if time had shattered between us. No one spoke. The only sound was the clock in the living room, ticking away the seconds of a scene I wish I'd never lived. She tried to say something, but her voice broke. In that silence, from behind the door, a man's voice whispered, "Calm." No one saw us. That's when I understood everything. I didn't want to believe it, but reality doesn't wait for your permission to crush you. My hands started to tremble. Rage and fear swirled like fire in my chest. I slowly opened the door, not knowing if I wanted to find the truth or keep living the lie. But before we continue, I'd like to know if you subscribe to the channel and like the video. This helps me see that you support me and enjoy my stories. Now, let's continue. When I opened the door, I saw him, my daughter's fiancé, half-dressed, standing by the bed, an expression of panic and shame on his face. On the nightstand, 2 wine glasses, a dress tossed aside, my wife's perfume hanging in the air. Everything was spinning. I felt the floor move, the ceiling pressing down on me. I closed my eyes, searching for an explanation that didn't exist. "This isn't what it looks like," he stammered, his lips dry. I didn't answer. I just looked at the reflection in the mirror across from the bed. There we were, all 3 of us, frozen in an image I will never be able to forget. Betrayal had a face, a smell, and a name. My wife, standing behind me, was barely breathing. She said something I didn't quite hear. An excuse, a plea, I don't know. At that moment, words were meaningless. When love rots, it stops speaking and starts to hurt in silence. I turned and walked away without looking back. I went down the stairs, my steps clumsy, each one a fresh wound. The air felt heavy in my lungs. I felt like I was suffocating in my own home. I got to the living room, poured myself a stiff drink, and downed it in one gulp. My hands were shaking so badly the glass slipped and shattered on the floor. In the dim light, I sat in the armchair where I used to read every night, where she had so often fallen asleep on my shoulder. Now, that place smelled like a lie. I closed my eyes and thought about my daughter, about how excited she was to get married, about the smile she had when she talked about that man, the man who, just minutes ago, had destroyed everything I held sacred. The clock struck midnight. The chimes echoed through the house, 1 for every year of my marriage. 29 sharp strikes, 29 years that had just died. I didn't sleep that night or the next. For hours, I just stared into the void, replaying every word, every gesture, every detail that had once seemed normal and now took on a different meaning. The story didn't begin that night. That night merely revealed what had been rotting for a long time. And so, with my heart in ruins and my mind on fire, I understood that when love betrays you, it doesn't kill you. It transforms you. It turns you into someone different, someone capable of doing things you never imagined. That dawn, as the first ray of sun slipped through the window, I made a decision. I wasn't going to scream or cry or beg. I wasn't going to destroy anyone in public. No, I would do something worse. I would let them live with the guilt, and while they tried to hide their shame, I would find out just how deep the lie went. What I didn't know yet was that the truth I was about to find wouldn't just destroy my marriage, it would rip away my faith in everything I believed about my own family. And so began my descent into a hell that, without knowing it, I had been building for years with my own hands. I don't remember ever feeling a silence as heavy as the one that morning. The sun streamed through the windows, bathing the house in gold as if nothing had happened, but inside me, everything was covered in shadows. The air smelled different, as if even the walls knew what had happened the night before. I sat at the table with my cold coffee, staring at the clock on the bookshelf, not knowing if time had passed or if it had stopped with me. She came downstairs a little later. She walked slowly, her eyes swollen, but she didn't look sorry. She looked tired. She didn't say good morning, didn't try to get close. She just poured herself a coffee, calmly added sugar, and sat across from me, as if nothing between us had shattered. Her coldness was a punishment more cruel than any words. I watched her without speaking, because when love dies, it doesn't need a speech. Silence is enough to confirm the burial. For a few seconds, our eyes met. In hers, there wasn't guilt, but fear. A different kind of fear. Not of being punished, but of what I might do with the truth. I wanted to speak, but the words got stuck in my throat. Rage was burning inside me, but something told me not to act yet, that I needed to understand why first. "Where did you sleep last night?" I managed to ask, my voice trembling. She didn't answer right away. She took a sip of her coffee, exhaled slowly, and said with a calmness that chilled my blood, "I'm not going to justify it. There's no point. That's all." 4 words that cut through me like knives. She wasn't asking for forgiveness, not making excuses. She was just admitting to the disaster like someone accepting an unavoidable accident. "And him?" I asked. "Does he also think there's no point?" She looked at me with a bitter expression. "You don't know everything, Michael." That sentence left me breathless. "You don't know everything," she repeated, her voice low, as if she were hiding something deeper than infidelity. But right then, my mind was too clouded to solve riddles. I got up from the table, left my coffee untouched, and walked to the door without looking at her. She didn't try to stop me. Every step toward the exit was a dull blow to my chest. Outside, the day was bright, almost mocking. Neighbors waved with smiles, oblivious to the drama burning behind my walls. I walked aimlessly. I ended up at the park where I used to take my daughter when she was little, back when I still believed my family was perfect. I sat on the same bench, under the same tree, but I was no longer the same man. Everything around me seemed like a carefully constructed lie. I thought about her laugh as a little girl, the pictures she drew for me with crayons, the birthdays where her mother held her lovingly. When had the farce begun? What part of my life was real, and what part had just been a well-rehearsed script? I spent hours there, going over every memory, looking for signs I hadn't wanted to see at the time. My wife's unexpected trips. The phone calls that ended abruptly when I walked into the room. The dinners where her gaze seemed lost. It wasn't the first time suspicion had brushed against me, but I had always chased it away with the same phrase. Trust her, Michael. She loves you. How blind can a man in love be? I returned home at dusk. The silence was still there, dense, impenetrable. My wife was in the kitchen, cooking something, as if trying to fill the air with normalcy. 2 plates were set on the table. I didn't know if she did it out of habit or guilt. "Let's eat," she said simply. We sat down without exchanging a word. The sound of silverware scraping against the plates was unbearable. I looked at her and thought about everything we had shared. A whole life, a daughter, dreams, promises. And still, she'd had the cold-bloodedness to destroy it all, 2 days before our only daughter's wedding. "Why him?" I finally asked. "Why our daughter's fiancé?" She looked up. For a moment, her mask cracked. I saw pain, but what she said next froze my soul. "Why were you never here?" That question hit me like a hammer. I didn't understand it at first. What did she mean by that? That her betrayal was my fault? That 20 years of work, of sacrifices, of sleepless nights to support this house meant nothing? I shot up from my chair. I didn't want to hear any more. But before I could leave, she added in a whisper I could barely hear, "You don't know who you are in this story, Michael." I turned, bewildered. "What are you talking about?" "Just that the truths you don't know yet might hurt more than the betrayal you think you saw," she answered, with a sadness that disarmed me. "When the time comes, you'll understand." I didn't know what to do. I felt the floor open up beneath me. I went upstairs, closed the door to the study, and stayed there until dawn. The house was asleep, but my mind couldn't rest. What did she mean by that? What truths? What else could she be hiding after I'd seen her with my daughter's fiancé? I lit a cigarette. Outside, the moon lit up the yard where, years ago, my daughter learned to walk. That same little girl who was now about to marry the man who had shattered my marriage, and without knowing it, maybe her life too. That night, as the smoke faded into the darkness, I swore I would find out everything, no matter the cost. I couldn't let my daughter live a lie, the way I had for so many years. I didn't know then that the truth I was looking for wouldn't just destroy me, but her as well. The days leading up to the wedding played out like a perfectly staged drama, and I, sitting in the front row, watched as everyone played their part with an almost sickening precision. My wife faked smiles while she coordinated the flower arrangements, the menu, the guests. My daughter's fiancé, Daniel, the young man I had considered almost a son, walked around the house naturally, avoiding my eyes. Everything seemed normal on the surface, but beneath that celebratory facade, the air was poisoned. Every word, every gesture, every look carried an invisible tension that only I seemed to notice. My daughter Sophia was radiant with happiness. Her joy was sincere, naive, pure. I watched her every morning, running between decorators, checking her dress, practicing her smile in the mirror, and I'd feel a lump in my throat. How could I tell her the truth? How could I break her heart 2 days before her dream came true? It wasn't fair. But it also wasn't fair to let her marry the man who had stained our home with the worst of sins. This conflict was eating me alive. Every time I hugged her, I felt like I was betraying her by staying silent. Every time I saw my wife and the fiancé exchange a furtive glance, I wanted to scream in front of everyone, to rip off their masks and expose them. But I held back. Not out of cowardice, but because I knew the right moment hadn't come yet. The next morning, while the rest of the house slept, I sat in the yard with a cup of coffee. The breeze carried the scent of roses and lies. I closed my eyes and remembered my wife's phrase, "You don't know who you are in this story." I didn't fully understand what she meant, but the idea wouldn't leave me alone. Every time I replayed it, I felt it hid something bigger, something I couldn't yet see. During breakfast, the faces seemed happy. The fiancé, Daniel, talked with my daughter about their honeymoon and the life plans they had together. My wife laughed. I pretended to listen, but I was really hanging on every word, looking for a crack, a slip-up. And then I noticed it. Every time he mentioned the future, my wife looked away. It wasn't guilt I saw in her eyes, it was fear. After we finished eating, she approached me and said in a firm voice, "Michael, we should talk to the photographer about the ceremony today." "You talked to him," I answered without looking at her. "We can't go on like this," she insisted, lowering her voice. "I don't want you to ruin our daughter's day." "Me? Ruin it?" I replied with a calm that made her take a step back. "Or are you afraid I'll be the one to say what you're hiding?" Her face hardened. She held my gaze for a few seconds and then left, but before she went, she muttered something that chilled me. Sometimes, staying silent is also a way of protecting. I didn't know if she meant herself, me, or our daughter. What I did understand was that there was something bigger, something everyone else seemed to know but me. That afternoon, Daniel's family arrived, Sophia's future in-laws. They were wealthy, proper, polite people. His mother greeted me with a courtesy so exaggerated it bordered on hypocrisy. His father, a large man, talked about business, investments, inheritances. As I listened to him, something in his tone made me uncomfortable. He spoke of the wedding not as a union of love, but as a transaction. In the middle of that conversation, Daniel entered the living room and put a hand on my wife's shoulder. A light, subtle gesture, but it was enough. I saw the tremor in her fingers, and she, instead of pulling away, just froze, looking somewhere else. In that instant, I knew the deception wasn't just a moment of weakness, it was an alliance. That night, when the house was empty, I searched her room. I didn't do it with guilt, but with the desperation of a man who no longer trusts anyone. I checked drawers, envelopes, papers, until I found a folder hidden under her lingerie. Inside, several printed sheets, bank statements, and among them, a copy of a recent wire transfer. The beneficiary was Daniel. The amount was enough to buy someone's silence. I stood there, paralyzed. It wasn't just infidelity, it was something darker. Money, manipulation, power. At dawn, the workers began setting up the tents in the yard. Everything seemed to be moving toward the perfect wedding, while I felt like I was sinking deeper into a farce. My wife walked past me without a greeting, pretending I didn't exist, and my daughter, oblivious to the hurricane, kept smiling. At noon, the seamstress arrived for the final dress fitting. Sophia came down the stairs, the white fabric brushing the steps. The sunlight bathed her, and for a moment I saw her as she was the day she was born, so small, so fragile, so mine. Tears blurred my vision. I couldn't let them destroy her life. I went to her, took her hands, and said, "Sophia, before you get married, promise me one thing." "Anything, Dad," she answered with that tenderness that always disarmed me. "Promise me that if you ever feel something isn't right, you won't ignore it. The truth always comes out in the end, honey." She laughed softly, not understanding the depth of my words. She hugged me and said, "You're the best dad in the world." I stood there, motionless. What would she have said if she knew that at that very moment her mother and her future husband were sharing a secret that could destroy us all? That night, I barely slept. In the darkness, I heard my wife moving around the house. I knew she wasn't sleeping. Neither was he. I got up, went to the staircase, and from the landing I saw them talking in low voices in the living room. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw the expression on her face. Desperation. That's when I understood they weren't just afraid of being discovered. They were afraid of something else, something I still couldn't see. And I knew, with a certainty that shook me, that the real hell hadn't even begun. I only slept a couple of hours that night. When I woke up, the house was silent, so still it felt empty. I walked barefoot to the study, feeling like someone was watching me from an invisible corner. I opened the window. The morning air was cool, but it didn't relieve the weight I felt in my chest. On the desk were the papers I'd found the night before, the transfers, the receipts, the names. The money sent to Daniel wasn't a coincidence, and my wife couldn't justify it as help or a loan. It wasn't just a betrayal of the heart, it was a calculated complicity. As I looked at them, I noticed something else. Tucked among the documents was a letter, folded in four, handwritten in ink that had faded slightly. I recognized it instantly. It was my wife's handwriting. At the top it said in a firm hand, "For Louis." Louis. The name hit me in the chest. I didn't know any Louis close to us, at least not in recent years. I hesitated for a moment before opening it, but curiosity overcame any sense of decency. The letter was short, written in a hurry. "I can't live with the guilt. Every time I see him, I feel like the past is coming back. If you ever read this, know that I did it for her. No one can ever know. That was it. No signature, no date, but that brief note held a world of secrets. The handwriting was hers, no doubt. I did it for her. For who? For Sophia? For someone else? Who was Louis?" I sat down, trying to put the pieces together. My wife's voice echoed in my head. "You don't know who you are in this story." Suddenly, that phrase started to carry a different weight, a different meaning. What if what she was hiding wasn't just an affair, but something much deeper, something that involved me without my knowledge? The sound of the front door opening startled me. It was Sophia, back from a dress fitting. Her joy lit up the house, but for me, it was like a spotlight revealing all the cracks. She hugged me sweetly, not noticing the tension in my eyes. "Dad, what are you doing up so early?" she asked, laughing. "Just thinking," I replied, hiding the tremor in my voice. "Mom says you shouldn't worry so much. Everything will be perfect." Perfect. The word sounded empty. I forced a smile. "Of course, honey. Everything will be fine." She left, humming a tune, her voice fading down the hall. I was left alone, staring at the letter. I had to know who Louis was. I searched through my things, old albums, old papers. In one drawer, I found photos from when Sophia was a baby. In one of them, my wife was holding her on the beach, and there, behind them, stood a young man, looking at the camera with a strange smile. Tall, dark hair, with the same mole next to his right eye that Daniel had. A chill ran down my spine. I grabbed another photo. In this one, the same man was sitting at the table with us at a dinner party from many years ago. I suddenly remembered his name, Luis Mendez, a friend of the family, a guy I worked with back in the day. He had vanished from our lives overnight. I never knew why, but now I was starting to understand. Louis, the man the letter was for. The man who had been close to my wife when Sophia was just a baby, and now my daughter's fiancé, Daniel, had the same mole, the same eyes, the same features. I refused to think the obvious. It was impossible. It couldn't be. But there were too many coincidences. I left the study, trembling. I found my wife in the yard, watering the plants, as if nothing was wrong. The sun lit up her face, and for a moment I thought I saw the same woman I had loved for 3 decades. But the image vanished as quickly as water soaking into the ground. I walked up to her without a word and showed her the letter. She looked at it, her face pale. "Where did you find this?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Among your things," I answered. "Who is Louis?" She didn't answer. Her breathing became shallow. She looked around the yard as if searching for an escape. "Answer me," I insisted, raising my voice. "Who was he? And what does I did it for her mean?" Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't speak. She turned her back to me and took a few steps. Then she stopped, put a hand on the trunk of the tree and whispered, "I can't. Not now." "What can't you do?" I asked. "Tell you." I stood still, feeling an old, contained rage. "There's nothing left to hide, Helen. I saw everything. I saw you coming out of Daniel's room. I saw you touching him. You can't sink me any lower than you already have." She turned to face me, her eyes red, and said something that froze me. "You don't understand. If I tell the truth, you lose more than you can imagine." "I've already lost everything," I replied. She shook her head, barely murmuring, "No, not yet." She walked away, leaving me alone among the flowers in the shadows of the yard. I stayed there for a long time, watching the door close behind her as the words from the letter echoed over and over in my mind. I did it for her. That afternoon, before nightfall, I took the letter, the photos, and the bank statements and put them in a folder. I was going to find out the whole truth. This wasn't about my wife or Daniel anymore. It was about something deeper, something that had to do with my daughter, with the past, with my own blood. I didn't know it then, but what I was about to discover would force me to face a truth no man should ever have to know. A truth that would break me forever. That night, the house felt like it was struggling to breathe. The lights were on, the arrangements were ready, the flowers perfumed the hallways, and yet everything felt dead. Outside, the yard sparkled under the string lights, but inside, the air was so thick it felt impossible to move without breaking something. It was the eve of the wedding, and while everyone else celebrated the impending happiness, I was carrying a secret that was eating my soul. I hadn't spoken to Helen again since the morning. Every time she passed me, she averted her gaze. I could feel her fear. I was afraid too, but it was the kind of fear that no longer paralyzes you. It's the kind that forces you to act. I spent the day faking serenity, waiting for the exact moment to confront her. I couldn't keep playing the perfect family. As night fell, I found her in the study, reviewing a guest list. The door was ajar. Her hair fell over her shoulders, and the dim light of the room made her look almost ghostly. I knocked softly on the wood. She turned. Her expression was that of someone who knew the truth had finally come to collect its debt. "We need to talk," I said. "Not now, Michael. Tomorrow's a big day." "That's exactly why. Because if we don't talk today, there won't be a wedding tomorrow." Her face tensed. She looked at me in silence, as if weighing whether it was still worth lying. Then she stood up slowly and went to the window. The moonlight framed her, fragile and guilty. "I found your papers, Helen." I put the folder on the desk. "The transfers, the letter to this Louis guy. There's no way to justify this." She put a hand to her face. She didn't cry. She just sighed with a resignation that enraged me even more. "I warned you that you wouldn't understand," she said quietly. "Then make me understand." I slammed my hand on the desk. "Tell me who Louis is. Tell me what he has to do with Daniel. Tell me now." She looked at me, and in her eyes I saw something I didn't expect. Pity. "Louis," she began, "he was someone who never should have been part of our lives. He worked with you, remember? The project at the company over 25 years ago." I nodded. Of course I remembered. He was the new engineer, the one everyone admired, the one who disappeared without a trace. "What happened to him, Helen?" She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and when she spoke, her voice was barely a thread. What happened was, Sophia is not your daughter. I felt the floor open up beneath my feet. I didn't scream. I didn't react. I just stood there in paralyzed silence, the echo of those words repeating over and over in my head. Sophia is not your daughter. You're lying, I managed to say, though I knew she wasn't. No, her voice trembled. I was young. I was lonely. You were working day and night. Louis was your friend. He was always here. And it happened. He swore no one would ever know. But when I found out I was pregnant, he disappeared. He never came back. The air left my chest. I gripped the edge of the desk so I wouldn't fall. And you hid this from me. All this time? I asked, almost voiceless. I wanted to protect you, Michael, and protect her. No one could know, and you loved her as your daughter. You raised her with so much love that I never doubted I'd done the right thing. I laughed, a bitter, hollow laugh. The right thing? Raising another man's daughter and lying to me for 30 years? Letting me live in a lie so perfect it even made me feel proud? She took a step toward me, but I backed away. It wasn't just for you, she said, crying now. It was for her. Sophia doesn't deserve to carry her parents' sin. And Daniel, I cut her off, my voice breaking. What does he have to do with any of this? Helen put a hand to her chest. Daniel is Louis's son. I froze. What did you say? Yes, she nodded slowly. Daniel is his son. I found out a few months ago when I saw them together for the first time. I didn't recognize him at first, but when I got a good look at him, I understood. The same smile, the same eyes, the same mole. It was like seeing a young Louis all over again. The room started to spin. I sat in the nearest chair, unable to breathe. It all fit. The letter, the photos, the transfer. Everything. That's why you helped him, I whispered. That's why you gave him money. I wanted to stop the wedding, but it was too late. He knew too. She wiped her tears. Daniel knew who Sophia was, and they still kept seeing each other. The silence that followed was unbearable. No, I said. It can't be. Yes, her voice was a shadow. What I'm telling you is true. They were going to get married, not knowing their brother and sister. I shot up, kicking the chair over. My God, I yelled. This is a curse. She covered her face with her hands, sobbing. I paced the room, aimless, breathless, my heart in pieces. I leaned on the desk and for an instant wished I had never found out. The love I felt for my daughter was still intact, but now it had a different weight, a different shape. It wasn't just love anymore. It was pity. It was fear. What are you going to do? She asked, her voice choked. I looked at her, my eyes now dry. Tomorrow, I said slowly. At the altar. Everyone will know the truth. No, please, she begged, coming closer. Don't ruin her life. Her life is already ruined, I roared. You destroyed it before it even began. I left the study without looking back. I went up to my room, locked the door, and collapsed on the bed. The house was silent, but inside me, there was only noise. I didn't sleep that night. The moon shone through the window, white and cruel, illuminating the family portrait on the wall. There we were, the three of us, smiling. Now I saw it with different eyes. Me, the proud father, her, the treacherous wife, and Sophia, the daughter who was never mine. I stared at the photo until the dawn began to paint the sky red, and I knew that the next day, when the sun rose on the wedding, there would be no turning back. I never imagined that my daughter's happiest day would be the darkest day of my life. Early that morning, the house filled with voices, laughter, perfume, and music. Everyone was talking about love, about the future, about promises, while I could barely stand. I walked among them like a ghost, greeting people with a smile that wasn't mine, faking normalcy while my world was collapsing inside. I looked at Sophia and felt a love so pure and so painful it split my soul. She was innocent in all of this, yet she was trapped in a story she didn't choose, in a destiny that others had twisted before she was even born. In her eyes, I saw the reflection of the little girl who used to run into my arms after a day at school, begging me to lift her into the air. Higher, Daddy. And I would lift her, laughing, believing that our love was invincible. How ironic. The lie was invincible, not the love. The yard was decorated with white flowers. A string quartet tuned their instruments under the tent. Guests began to arrive, dressed in their best, with happy faces, never suspecting that this day would be remembered not for love, but for the silence before a storm. Helen moved back and forth, organizing everything with a composure I found unbearable. She had managed to hide her guilt under a smile, as if every petal and every wine glass were just another brick in the wall of her deception. I watched her for a long time, trying to understand how she could keep breathing so serenely. "Michael," she said as she passed, not looking at me. "Please don't do anything." I didn't answer. There were no words to explain the hell burning inside me. At 5 p.m, the musicians began to play the wedding march. Everyone stood. I was in the front row, next to the aisle of petals. The sun set on Sophia's white dress, making it shine as if it were made of light. Her face radiated an innocent, almost childlike happiness. And then I saw him. Daniel. Standing at the altar, waiting for her, with that calm smile, with that look I now knew the origin of. The same eyes, the same mole, the same shadow of Lewis, the son of the man who had destroyed my marriage, ready to marry the daughter who was never mine. When Sophia stopped halfway down the aisle, our eyes met. She smiled at me tenderly. "Dad," she whispered, "are you okay?" I nodded. I couldn't ruin this moment, not like this. My heart was screaming at me to say everything, but my lips refused to move. It wasn't her fault. It wasn't fair for her life to end before it began. The officiant began to speak. I didn't hear the words, only the rustle of the wind through the flowers. The voices faded into a distant echo, and the only thing I could feel was the pulse of my own heart pounding against my chest. "If anyone has any reason why these two should not be joined in matrimony, speak now or forever, hold your peace." A heavy silence fell over the yard, like a stone in a pond. Hundreds of eyes looked forward. I clenched my fists. I could feel the voice rising from the depths of my soul, pushing against my throat. They're brother and sister. You can't let this happen. I stood up. The crowd turned to look at me. Helen stared in terror. But in that last instant, as I opened my mouth to speak, I saw Sophia. Her eyes full of love, her breathing quick, the emotion held on her face. And I couldn't. I sat back down. I swallowed the truth like it was poison. The officiant continued. The rest was a blur of words and applause. I watched them exchange rings, the kiss, the promises. Every gesture was another knife twisting inside me. When everyone clapped, I remained motionless. I felt empty. I didn't know if I had done the right thing or if I had just condemned them both. During the reception, I pretended to drink, pretended to laugh. Everyone came up to congratulate me, to tell me how proud I must be to see my daughter married. No one noticed my short breaths or my trembling hands. At one point, Helen came close and whispered in my ear, "Thank you." That word, spoken with relief, was what finally broke me. I looked at her with a hatred I had never felt before. "Don't thank me," I said. "It's not over yet." I walked away toward the back of the yard where no one could see me. The sound of the music mixed with the laughter, but to me, it all sounded distant. I lit a cigarette and stared at the orange sunset. Then, I saw something. In the distance, among the trees, Daniel was talking to a man I didn't know. Tall, gray-haired, in a dark suit. I couldn't see his face clearly, but there was something in his posture, in the way he moved, that felt familiar. He took an envelope from his pocket and handed it to Daniel. Daniel quickly tucked it into his jacket and looked back toward the house. The rage surged back up like fire in my throat. I moved closer, trying to be quiet, but by the time I took a few steps, the man was already gone, down the side street. Daniel saw me and faked a nervous smile. "Everything okay, sir?" he asked. "Perfect," I replied, my eyes fixed on the envelope peeking out of his jacket. That night, long after everyone was asleep, I went back to the empty living room. The remains of the party covered the floor, broken glasses, wilted petals, crumpled napkins. Everything smelled like perfume and lies. I collapsed into a chair and put my head in my hands. The house, which had once been a symbol of love, was now just a mausoleum of secrets. In that silence, I knew I couldn't just stand by. Not this time. I had stayed silent for love, for compassion, for fear. But I understood then that silence can also be a form of cowardice, and I wasn't going to die a coward. The next morning, as the sun was just peeking over the horizon, I got up. I went to the study and opened the folder with the documents, the photos, the letter, the transfers. Everything I had saved was there, waiting for me. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do, but I knew one thing. The game was over. I wasn't looking for revenge or justice anymore. I just wanted the truth, clean and complete, even if it destroyed me. Because sometimes the only way to heal a wound is to open it all the way. The morning after the ceremony dawned quiet. Too quiet. The sun streamed through the windows, the flowers were still fresh, the yard looked like a painting. No one suspected that this calm was just the breath before the earthquake. The wedding had been a success, everyone said, a perfect event, a beautiful couple, an exemplary family. Laughter filled the house, and I, sitting at the head of the table, watched them like a silent judge, like a man who knew that in a few minutes the sky was going to fall. The celebration brunch was in the same yard where I had chosen to stay silent the night before. A long table was set with white linens, gleaming glasses and china. The guests were toasting endlessly, oblivious to the tragedy, breathing the same air they were. Sophia, still in her dress, came up to me, radiant, and hugged me. "Thank you for everything, Dad. It wouldn't have been possible without you." I looked at her and felt a lump in my throat. Her happiness was so pure, it hurt. I thought about the truth I was hiding, the one burning my lips and my soul. If I tell her, I destroy her. If I don't, I condemn her. I understood there was no way out that didn't involve loss. Helen was sitting at the other end of the table, watching my every move. She knew something was coming. She could see it in the way I was breathing, in the tremor of my hands, in the fixed stare I kept on Daniel. He, meanwhile, was smiling too much, a forced, almost arrogant smile, trying to hide his nerves. Ever since I'd seen that mysterious envelope the night before, I couldn't stop wondering what was in it. It wasn't just paper. It was a shadow, a threat, a sign that there was still one piece of the puzzle missing. I picked up my glass and tapped it lightly with a spoon. The metallic chime spread across the yard, and the conversation stopped. "I'd like to say a few words," I announced. Everyone turned to me. Sophia was smiling. Daniel faked serenity. Helen tensed. "This is a special day," I continued, "a day I will remember for the rest of my life, because today I have understood what love and truth really mean." I paused. I could feel the air grow thicker, feel even the birds stop in midair. "For many years I believed that family was a refuge," I went on. "That home was the one place we would always be safe. But sometimes, home can also be a trap." A murmur started to grow among the guests. Helen half stood as if to stop me, but one look from me was enough to make her freeze. This wedding represents something more than love. It represents the weight of secrets. I pulled out the folder of documents I had brought with me. The sound of the paper as I opened it was like thunder in the silence. There are truths I have kept silent for too long, but today, no more. "Michael, stop!" Helen yelled, her voice trembling. "You had your chance to say it," I shot back. "Now it's my turn." I looked at Sophia. She was watching me, confused, her face pale. "Honey," I said, my voice cracking, "before you keep celebrating, there's something you need to know." Helen burst into tears. Daniel looked down. "For 30 years I have loved you with everything I am. I was your father at every step, through every scrape, every joy. But yesterday, I found out that I'm not." A gasp of shock rippled across the table. Sophia froze. "What? What are you saying, Dad?" she stammered. "Your mother lied to you." My voice broke, but I kept going. "The man who gave you life was someone else, a man named Luis Mendez." Helen covered her face, sobbing. Sophia looked at her horrified. "That can't be true," Daniel said, standing up. "Oh, really?" I countered. "Then explain to me why you, Daniel, have the same mole he did. Why your bank records show wire transfers from my wife. Why you two were meeting in secret before the wedding." The guests started whispering. Some got up. Sophia swayed on her feet. "Dad, please," she cried. "Tell me it's not true." I took the letter from the folder and put it on the table. "Here it is. Written by your mother. I did it for her. That's what it says. What she did was hide who you are. And what you did, Daniel, was even worse. You knew the truth. The silence was absolute. Not even the wind dared to move. Daniel turned white. Helen tried to reach for him, but he backed away, muttering something I barely understood. I just wanted to protect her. Protect her? I snapped. From what? From knowing you were about to marry your sister. Sophia's scream tore through the air. She fell to her knees, sobbing, as the guests crowded in, trying to understand what was happening. Helen ran to her, but Sophia pushed her away. "Don't touch me!" she screamed. "You lied to me my whole life!" People started to leave, horrified. The yard, which hours before had been a stage for love and celebration, was now a field of ruins. The flowers seemed to wilt under the weight of the exposed truths. I didn't move. I just stayed there, looking at the disaster I had caused, my soul in pieces. Sophia got up slowly. She looked at me, her eyes swollen. "Why did you do it today?" she asked. "Because I couldn't be silent anymore, honey," I answered. "The truth, even when it hurts, is always better than living a lie." She ran off toward the gate. Helen followed her, pleading. Daniel stood frozen, his gaze lost. When the last person left the yard, I was alone among the wreckage of the wedding. Toppled glasses, trampled flowers, extinguished laughter. The silence returned, but it was no longer the silence of secrets. It was the silence of ruin. And in that emptiness, for the first time in years, I felt something like peace, not joy, not relief, just peace, because the truth, even as it destroys, also sets you free. I don't remember how long I sat in that empty yard, surrounded by the ruins of the wedding. The sun had set, and the string lights were still on, illuminating a scene of devastation and silence. The petals that had symbolized love that morning now looked like stains on the damp ground. The air smelled of spilled wine, tears, and shame. I heard nothing but the sound of my own breathing. The truth was out, and yet, instead of feeling free, I felt empty, as if I had ripped something out of myself that I could never get back. Suddenly, I heard a door slam. I turned. It was Helen. Her face was a wreck, her makeup streaked, her hands shaking. She had the look of a woman who no longer expects forgiveness, only an ending. "Sophia's gone," she said, out of breath. "No one knows where." I stared at her without a word. "I've called everyone," she continued. "Her friends, Daniel's family, the hotels. No one has seen her." I stood up slowly. The chair scraped behind me. "What did you expect?" I said quietly. "You destroyed her life." "Don't say that," she sobbed. "I was just trying to protect her." "Protect her?" I repeated, stepping closer. "From what? From the truth? From her own origins? From her own brother?" She covered her face. "I couldn't lose her, Michael. If I told her, everything would have been over. Everything is over anyway." I stopped in front of her. "Only this time, it's because of your lies." Helen fell to her knees, crying silently. For a second, I wanted to scream all the hatred I had left at her, but I couldn't. Her sobs were so human, so desperate, that all I felt was tired. "Tell me one thing," I asked. "When you saw him, when you realized Daniel was Lewis's son, why didn't you stop the wedding?" She looked up, trembling. "Because he threatened me." The silence cut me like a knife. "Daniel?" She nodded. "He said if I spoke up, he would tell Sophia everything, that you weren't her father, that he knew the truth, that if I didn't let him marry her, he would make everything that happened years ago public." I froze. "And what did he get out of it?" "Money," she whispered. "Lewis didn't die poor. I found out a month ago that he left me an inheritance I never claimed. Daniel knew. He demanded half of it in exchange for keeping the secret." "And you gave it to him?" "Yes," she cried. "I did it to avoid a scandal so Sophia wouldn't suffer, but it all spun out of control." I ran a hand over my face. Disgust and pity warred inside me. I didn't know what repulsed me more, her cowardice or my own blindness. "And Lewis?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "What really happened to him?" She looked at me as if she hadn't expected that question. She lowered her head. "Lewis died because of me." The air stopped. "What are you saying?" We had an argument. He told me he wanted to take Sophia. He said you didn't deserve to raise her. I was furious. I pushed him. He fell down the stairs at the hotel where he was working. It was an accident, but her voice broke. I didn't do anything. I didn't call anyone. I just left him there, and then I disappeared from his life forever. I felt my stomach clench. And you let me believe for 30 years that he was just a good man who walked away. I couldn't carry that too. I thought time would erase it. I laughed bitterly. Time doesn't erase anything, Helen. It just buries it until something digs it back up. She reached her hand out to me. Please, Michael, if we find Sophia, let me talk to her first. I pushed her hand away. No, if we find her, I'll be the one to tell her the whole truth. No varnish, no lies. For once in her life, she deserves to hear it from someone who hasn't deceived her. I left the house. The night was cold and the wind was blowing hard. I walked aimlessly through the neighborhood streets, looking for signs, for lights on, for any trace of my daughter. I called her name into the darkness. No answer. Every corner just echoed my own voice back at me. Hours passed. Finally, near dawn, I saw her. She was sitting in the park on the same bench where she used to play as a child. Her dress was wrinkled, her eyes swollen. I approached slowly, afraid she would run. Honey, I said softly. She didn't look at me. Why, Dad? She asked, her voice broken. Why did you wait so long to say it? I sat down next to her. Because I didn't want to lose you. You lost me anyway, she whispered. It hurt more than any blow. I wanted to touch her hand, but she didn't move. I'm not your father by blood, I said, but I am by choice, and that doesn't change anything for me. She finally looked at me. Her face was full of pain, but also something else, a deep weariness, the same weariness I felt. I can't hate you, Dad. I can't even hate her. I don't know who I am anymore. You are who you've always been, I answered, the person I raised, the one who gave me a reason to keep breathing. We sat in silence, watching the sunrise. The sky turned orange, and for the first time in many years, I felt that the day wasn't bringing promises, but consequences. When we got back to the house, Helen was sitting on the stairs, her gaze lost. She stood up when she saw us. Sophia. No, my daughter cut her off. There's nothing left to say. She went into her room and closed the door. Helen broke down. I looked at her with a mix of fury and pity. You've destroyed everything, Helen, I said, my voice tired. And the worst part is, you still think you did it for love. She looked up, trembling. And you? She whispered. What are you going to do now? I looked at her, my gaze steady. What I should have done years ago. End this, once and for all. I went up to the study, got the folder of evidence, and picked up the phone. Good evening, Dr. Evans. This is Michael Davis. Yes, I need you to prepare the divorce papers, and I want to reopen an old case. Yes, from 1995. The death of a man named Luis Mendez. I hung up without waiting for a reply. Downstairs, Helen's sobs mixed with the silence of the house, and for the first time, I felt the weight start to shift. I felt the cycle beginning to close. I didn't know what would be left standing after all this, but one thing was certain. There would be no more secrets. I never imagined that silence could be so deafening. After that afternoon, the house became a tomb. The wilted wedding flowers were still in their vases, motionless witnesses to what we had destroyed. The phone rang non-stop for the first few days. Friends, neighbors, reporters, the curious. But I didn't answer. I let the noise burn itself out, like a fire dying when it runs out of air. The scandal had spread like wildfire. The news reached every corner of town. Father ruins daughter's wedding, reveals she's product of affair. The stories changed depending on who was telling them. Some said I was crazy, others that I'd acted out of revenge. No one understood the truth, because the truth isn't told in headlines. Helen didn't leave her room. She spent her days locked away, in silence, not eating, not speaking. Sometimes I'd hear her crying, other times praying. I didn't try to comfort her. There were no words left between us. Something deeper than love had died. Trust. Sophia, meanwhile, had gone to live with a friend in another city. She called me only once, a few days after she left. Her voice sounded calm, but distant. Don't look for me, Dad. I need time, she said. I just want to know you're okay, I replied. I'm alive. That's enough for now." And she hung up. That call was like a punch. Knowing she was alive was a relief, but feeling her so far away hurt more than any betrayal. I spent my nights staring at her empty room, the photos on the walls, the book she left unfinished. I told myself that everything I did for love. But sometimes I wondered if love justifies the pain it causes. One morning, my attorney called. "Michael, the papers are ready," he said. His voice was dry, professional. I nodded silently, though he couldn't see me. "Thank you, Dr. Evans. File them. I don't want to delay anything." That afternoon, I signed the divorce papers. There were no screams, no accusations, just 2 signatures on a piece of paper. Helen came down from her room without looking at me. Her face was gaunt, her skin pale, her eyes sunken. Her hands trembled as she held the pen. "This is how it ends?" she asked. "This is how what never should have started ends," I replied. She signed without another word. Then she left without saying goodbye. The door closed with a heavy thud, and the echo hung in the house like a funeral bell. The following days blurred together. I lived among shadows, among memories that smelled of wine, old paper, and broken promises. I'd get up early, make coffee, and sit at the study window, looking at the yard that had witnessed my ruin. I wasn't waiting for anything anymore. I was just watching. One afternoon, while I was sorting through old documents, I got an unexpected visitor. It was Detective Reynolds, a man in his 50s with a tired look in his eyes. He was holding a folder with the police department's seal. "We reopened the Luis Mendez case," he said. "We found inconsistencies in the original report." I nodded, not surprised. I knew sooner or later they'd come looking for me. "You were the one who filed the report, weren't you?" he asked. "Yes, but I didn't do it out of spite. I did it for justice." The detective looked at me with a certain pity. "Sometimes justice comes too late." "It's never too late for the truth," I replied. He left the documents on my desk and left without another word. I was left alone, staring at that folder. For an instant, I felt the urge to close it and burn it, to end it all. But I didn't. I opened the envelope and read the header. "Case reopened. Involuntary manslaughter inquiry." I didn't feel anger, just an infinite exhaustion. That night, the rain fell hard. The drops hammered the windows as if the sky wanted to wash away what was left of this story. I poured myself a glass of whiskey and sat in front of the family portrait that still hung on the wall. I looked at it for a long time. In the photo, the 3 of us were smiling. I walked over and slowly took it down. The glass was covered in dust. I set it on the desk and, with my finger, traced a circle over Sophia's face. "You're not to blame for any of this, honey," I murmured. "But if you ever decide to come back, I'll be here. Not as your father, but as the man who loved you more than his own truth." I turned off the light. All that was left was the faint reflection of the storm lighting up the house. The next day, the papers ran the story. "Cold case reopened in mysterious death of Luis Mendez." In the article's photo, his young, confident face looked at me from the past. Under the headline, a paragraph mentioned my name as a key collaborator in the investigation. I closed the paper and threw it in the fireplace. I didn't want justice anymore. I just wanted silence. Weeks later, I received a letter. There was no return address, but I recognized the handwriting instantly. It was from Sophia. I opened it with trembling hands. "Dad, I need to heal, far away from everything. I don't know if I can forgive, but I do want to understand. Sometimes I think about you and wonder how you managed to live for so many years with such huge secrets. If I've learned anything from all this, it's that the truth hurts, but it also cleanses. Don't look for me. When I'm ready, I'll come back." I folded the letter and put it in the desk drawer. I stared at it, like someone holding a half-kept promise. That night, I slept without nightmares for the first time in months, maybe because the silence, though heavy, wasn't suffocating me anymore. It was a new, different silence, not the silence of fear, but of a beginning. And so, in the midst of the ruins, I understood something it had taken me a lifetime to learn, that the truth doesn't destroy families. It only reveals which ones were a lie from the start. Almost 6 months had passed since the scandal. The house no longer smelled of flowers and perfume, but of old wood and loneliness. I got used to the silence, to the sound of the clock marking the hours, the creak of the doors as they opened. Time had lost its shape. The days were all the same, and the nights were endless. The divorce was final. The case against Lewis was still in the hands of the justice system. And Sophia was still gone. I hadn't heard from her since that letter. Sometimes I'd sit on the porch at dusk, a cold coffee in my hand, watching the driveway, imagining I'd see her suddenly appear with that smile she had as a little girl. But it never happened, until that one Sunday morning. It was early, the sun barely touching the windows, when I heard the sound of a car engine stopping out front. I thought it was the mailman or a neighbor, but when I opened the door, my heart stopped. Sophia was standing there. She had changed. Her hair, once long and blonde, was now short. Her face had the serenity of someone who has cried too much and learned to be quiet. She was wearing a gray coat and carrying a small suitcase. "Hi, Dad," she said, her voice soft, almost a whisper. For a moment, I didn't know what to do. I wanted to hug her, but my legs wouldn't respond. I just looked at her, afraid that if I blinked, she would disappear. "Can I come in?" she asked. I nodded silently. She walked in slowly, looking at every corner as if she both recognized and didn't recognize the house. Her gaze stopped on the family portrait I had hung back up, the glass clean, but the frame gone. "You still have it," she said. "I couldn't throw it away," I replied. "Sometimes I look at it and wonder if that moment was real, or if it was already a lie." Sophia didn't answer. She sat in the armchair and folded her hands on her lap. I sat across from her, feeling a knot in my stomach. The silence stretched. Finally, she spoke. "I've thought a lot about you, Dad, about everything that happened. At first, I hated you. I felt like you took everything from me. But then I understood. The only thing you did was open everyone's eyes, including mine." I swallowed hard. "I never wanted to hurt you, Sophia. I just wanted you to know the truth before it was too late." "I know," she said, her voice calm. "But it hurts just the same." I looked down, my hands trembling on my knees. Not a day goes by that I don't think about you, about what I should or shouldn't have done, if staying silent would have been better. "No," she interrupted. "The silence was killing us, Dad. The truth might have destroyed everything, but it also set us free." Her words passed through me like a sigh. I looked at her and saw something in her eyes I thought was lost. Tenderness. Not the tenderness of a daughter who admires, but of a woman who understands. "And Daniel?" I asked cautiously. She looked away. "He's gone. I never heard from him again, but I don't blame him. He was a victim in all this too." I nodded. "And your mother?" I asked. "She's living with an aunt up north. She wrote to me recently. She said she asked you for forgiveness." I smiled bitterly. "She asked, but I don't know if it can be given. Some wounds don't heal. They just stop bleeding." Sophia nodded silently. Then she took something out of her bag, a small wooden box. "This is yours," she said. I opened it. Inside was a picture of the two of us, taken when she was 6. We were in the park, laughing in the rain, soaked and happy. On the back, in her childish handwriting, it said, "Daddy, you're my home." A lump formed in my throat. "Where did you find this?" "In my old things. I'd kept it for years." She smiled softly. "And it's still true, even if the house is a little broken now." Tears escaped before I could stop them. She moved closer, and for the first time since it all happened, she hugged me. It was a slow, trembling, but real hug. "I don't know if I'll ever be able to call you like I did before," she whispered against my shoulder, "but I want to try to get something back, whatever we can." "That's enough," I answered, my voice thick. "I don't need anything more than that." We stayed like that for a long time, in silence, as the midday light streamed through the window. The clock struck 12, but for the first time, the time didn't hurt. When she pulled away, she looked at me with shining eyes. "You know, Dad, sometimes I think the truth didn't destroy our family. It just showed it for what it really was." "Maybe," I said, smiling. "But now we can build something new, even if it's small, something ours, with no lies." She nodded. "I want that." We spent the rest of the day walking in the yard, not talking much, just listening to the wind in the trees, the distant song of the birds. Everything was different. We weren't father and daughter in the old sense. We were two broken souls who had decided to keep walking together. When the sun began to set, Sophia said goodbye. "I'll be back soon," she promised. "Don't lock yourself away in here, okay?" I smiled. "I promise." I watched her walk down the path. Her figure grew smaller in the golden light of the sunset until she disappeared. I closed the door and looked at the house. It was still empty, yes, but it didn't feel so heavy. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat in the armchair. The photo from the box was still on the table. I picked it up and looked at it in silence. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel guilt. I felt hope. And I understood that sometimes, after you've lost everything, life gives you one last chance. Not to redo the past, but to learn to live with it. A few weeks passed after Sophia's visit. The house was still quiet, but something had changed. It was no longer a dead silence, but a calm one, like a wound that's beginning to scar over. Every morning I opened the windows, let the fresh air in, and found myself thinking about the future, even a small future, without big promises. I started taking care of the yard again, pruning, weeding, planting. It was my way of putting what was left of me in order. In every new plant, I saw an attempt at redemption. Sometimes I'd catch myself talking aloud, imagining Sophia was nearby, listening. Until one afternoon, the phone rang. The sound echoed through the house, shattering the calm. I stared at it for a few seconds before answering, with that strange feeling that comes before a call that changes something. "Hello?" I answered. On the other end, a voice I recognized instantly, even though I hadn't heard it in months. "It's me, Michael," Helen said. My heart lurched. "What do you want?" "To talk. One last time." I stayed silent. I didn't know whether to hang up or listen. Part of me wanted to forget she existed, but another part, the part that still hurt, needed answers. "Go on," I managed to say. "I'm sick," she whispered. "They confirmed it 2 weeks ago. Cancer. It's advanced." I stood motionless. The words hit me like an icy current. "I'm not calling for pity," she continued. "Not even for forgiveness. I don't want to go with any more secrets." I leaned against the wall, trying to process what she was saying. "What else could you possibly be hiding, Helen?" I asked bitterly. "Something I've owed you for 30 years, she said. "Louis, it wasn't just an accident." I closed my eyes. "You already told me that." "No, Michael, there's more." Her voice trembled. "It wasn't just the fall. He survived it. He called 911, but I stopped him. I took the phone from him. He screamed your name. He cursed me. And when he tried to get up, I just left him." An unbearable silence stretched between us. I could hear her ragged breathing on the other end of the line. I didn't mean to, Michael. It was fear. I thought if I helped him, I would lose everything. You, Sophia. The life we had built. Her voice broke. And since that day, I've never stopped seeing his face. I sat on the sofa, my head in my hands. I felt the weight of all those decades crashing down on me at once. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "Because I'm out of time, and because I need Sophia to know, but I can't be the one to tell her. I don't want her to remember me as a murderer." I laughed, humorless. "That's exactly what you were." "Yes," she admitted through her sobs, "but I was also a desperate woman. I'm not asking for absolution, just don't let her hate me, because of me." I was silent for a long time. Outside, it had started to rain. The tapping of the drops against the glass filled the spaces between our words. "Where are you?" I finally asked. "Cedar Crest Clinic. They're discharging me tomorrow. After that, I don't know." She hung up before I could reply. I sat there, staring at nothing. Inside, everything was a whirlwind. Hate, sadness, pity, an impossible mix. I poured a glass of water, but I could barely hold it. My hands were shaking. I didn't sleep that night. I thought about Sophia, about her face when she said she wanted to start over. I thought about Helen, about the fear that had driven her to become a shadow of herself. And I thought about me, about all the times I chose silence when I should have screamed. The next morning, I drove to the clinic. I didn't know why I was doing it. Maybe to close the circle. Maybe because, in the end, love and resentment are branches of the same tree. When I walked into a room, Helen was lying back, hooked up to an IV. When she saw me, she smiled weakly. "I knew you'd come," she whispered. "I don't know why I did," I replied. "I guess I needed to see you one last time." I sat by her bed. She tried to touch my hand but stopped halfway. "I don't deserve your forgiveness," she said, "but I want you to know something. It wasn't all a lie. What I felt for you, it was real. What we had, despite everything." I know. I looked at her in silence. Her face was aged, but for the first time in years, I saw peace in her expression. "So what do you want me to do with all this?" I asked. "How do you live after so much destruction?" "You don't," she whispered. "You just learn to die, a little at a time. But you can still live, Michael. Do it for Sophia. She's the only thing we ever really did right." She closed her eyes, exhaling slowly. For a second, I thought she had fallen asleep, but then she whispered, "Forgive me." I didn't answer. I just took her hand and stayed like that for several minutes, listening to the sound of her breathing. Then I let go and walked out of the room without looking back. When I got home, Sophia was there, waiting for me on the porch, her face serious. "I saw her," she said. "She called me before she called you." I nodded. "What did you say to her?" I asked. "Nothing. Sometimes silence is the only forgiveness possible." We both stood there in the doorway, looking at the overcast sky. The rain was starting again, fine and steady, like a sad blessing. "Dad," she said after a long time, "do you forgive her?" I thought about her voice, her tears, the woman she was and the one she became. "I don't know," I answered, "but I don't hate her anymore. And maybe that's a start." Sophia smiled tenderly. "Then yes, you do." I stayed quiet. And for the first time, I felt like she was right. The rain kept falling, slowly washing away the footprints of the past. Time has passed. I couldn't say exactly how much. The days stopped having names. The weeks blend together like leaves swept up by the wind. Sometimes the sun comes up, and I'm surprised to still be here, breathing, watching the light come through the same window where, a year ago, everything began to fall apart. The yard has bloomed again. It's strange. After so much death, life insists on returning. The roses Sophia planted when she was little have budded without anyone tending to them. Maybe nature knows how to forgive what humans cannot. Helen died 3 weeks ago. I found out from a call from the hospital. She died peacefully, they said. No pain. No name on the headstone at her request. I hung up the phone and didn't cry. I just stared at the sky for a long time, feeling something I couldn't name. It wasn't relief, and it wasn't sadness. It was an end. That same day, Sophia came to see me. She arrived without calling, a flower in her hand. She hugged me without saying anything. She didn't mention her mother or what had happened. She just sat with me in the yard under the old tree. "You know," she said after a while, "sometimes I think, with everything that happened, we're still a family. Not a perfect one, but a real one." I smiled. Maybe real families are just the ones that survive the truth. She nodded. We spent the afternoon talking about simple things: the weather, the job she got, the dog she adopted. Life finally seemed to be flowing again. As she was leaving, she gave me a folded letter. "Mom left this for you," she whispered. I looked at it, not opening it. "Did you read it?" "No," she said, "it was only for you." When she was gone, I was alone again. I opened the letter slowly, afraid of what it might contain. "Michael, if you're reading this, I'm already gone. I don't want to justify anything. I just want to leave you with one truth I never said out loud. The day Sophia was born, you were there, holding my hand. Louis was already gone. And when the nurse put her in my arms, I didn't see her biological father. I saw our daughter. Because you, Michael, were the first one to love her. That's why, even though the blood says otherwise, Sophia was always yours. I'm not looking for forgiveness, but I hope you remember that when you think of me. Helen." I stared at those lines until the ink blurred through my tears. They weren't tears of pain. They were tears of an understanding that had taken a lifetime to arrive. That night, I sat in front of the portrait of Sophia and me. I looked at it for a long time. I thought about everything that had happened, the lies, the guilt, the revelations. But most of all, I thought about what had survived it all, the love. Imperfect, but real. The next day, I took the letter out to the yard. I folded it carefully and buried it near the roots of the tree where Sophia used to play, not as an act of forgetting, but as a farewell. When I was done, I sat on the bench breathing slowly. I felt peace. I looked up at the sky where the sun was beginning to set behind the hills. "You know, Helen," I murmured, "I forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because I need to rest." The wind blew softly, rustling the leaves, as if someone were answering with a sigh. Then I closed my eyes, and for the first time in a very, very long time, I smiled, because I understood that some truths destroy, yes, but there are also truths that set you free, and that, at last, was mine.